Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and welcome to a video with wonderful hobby highs, terrible hobby lows, everything in between. I didn't think I was going to get this one out. It's put me right through the ringer. I hope there is something entertaining within it. And yeah, I guess join me as I paint up my own General of the Empire from the wonderful and mighty province of Stirland. Let's paint. So Games Workshop sent us through for review the couple of the new resin characters for Warhammer the Old World. Harold Gemmenson, Grandmaster of the Knights Panther, and General Hans von Lohenhack. Two great characters from the recent Empire Arcane Journal book that's come out, and this is how we're getting the majority of new models for Warhammer Fantasy now, Warhammer the Old World, via these resin models from Forge World or Specialist Games as they are now. Now, I am a huge Warhammer Fantasy nerd. I love it. That, along with Heresy, they're my favourite places to hobby and daydream and do all the rest of it. And when this stuff came through, I was like, oh, what can I do? Is it worth doing it? Will there be an appetite for a video for this? Do I just paint them up as is, as the box art sort of thing is? And I thought, you know what, I'm in a very privileged position to get to play with some of this stuff early and create content for you guys. And I thought, let's just have some fun and let's create my own character. I have always had a soft spot for the province of Stirland, looked down upon by many other sort of snooty, more, shall we say, puffy-sleeved provinces. And yeah, consequently, I thought, you know what, let's make a general from Stirland. So I've used the majority of the mounted kit of the Knights Panther kit, but what I want to try and do is create my own character from this. So how can I do that? Simply by looking at the model. So we can change the head, that's going to change a lot of it, perhaps change a weapon, that's going to really change the silhouette, and then obviously the paintwork will do a lot for us. So you can see I'd washed the resin parts. Not something I always do, but it is recommended that you do it. And I thought, you know what, I wanted to treat this project with a bit of care. So I have washed the parts. And then once I've collected the bits together, so it included the hammer from Hans von Lohenhack, and then these resin characters they've been doing for the old world have been quite large compared to the older plastics we have. And I also think they have stylistically quite a lot in common with a lot of the things we see from Blood Bowl. So when I was thinking what different head could I put on the guy, I suddenly thought, oh, about the human Blood Bowl team that came out a little while ago. So got on the blower to Ben. He sent me through the Blood Bowl team. He had a few of the sprues left. And there was a bunch of heads on there that I thought were brilliant. And there was this one with a pipe in his mouth, and I thought it's perfect. I am a fan of the slightly sillier, almost Pratchett-esque Empire. I love the guys with no shoes on. I love the mechanical engineer on steed. A little bit of silly for me is a positive, particularly I think if you enjoy painting in that sort of grimmer style as well. I kind of like that juxtaposition between that. So, yeah, the Blood Bowl heads were perfect for it. Putting the pieces together wasn't too difficult. I've pinned pieces when it's resin. And for instance, the arm here wasn't a straight swap, but it was close enough. And the reason I've drilled that out there with a larger drill bit was essentially so that I could sort of insert the wrist up into it, or the forearm up into it, so the glove sort of came over the forearm a little bit more 3D than just a sort of flat connection. I thought it'd look a little bit nicer. And I noticed on the barding of this horse, on its rump, the symbol that's on there it's really not a million miles away from the flag of Stirland. So I was like, fantastic. So I thought I'd carve off the Sigmar stuff, and then I'll freehand on Stirland later. So at this point of the project, this is still wide-eyed, naive Henry. I think he's going to have a wonderful time, just enjoying the hobby. There were quite a few gaps on this miniature, some of them worse than I have experienced recently from resin kits from Forge World. But it's just the nature of the beast. You know, we produce resin miniatures. We know that you're never going to get absolutely perfect every single time you do them. So there's always going to be a little bit of gap filling to do. And for this project, I've just used Vallejo plastic putty. If this was for a display model, I'd probably look at using something more like Milliput, or maybe even some sculpting putty. I like to use things like Magisculpt, but it was meant to be fun. This wasn't meant to be anything more than a sort of fun gaming piece. So I didn't want to spend absolutely ages on every single element of it. I wanted to keep the momentum going with the project. So that meant not necessarily cutting corners, but also not worrying about absolutely perfect finishes with the conversions, nor with the paint job. Kind of sketchy, but I don't really like using that word. Another thing I've done here is I've just put a little bit of heat on the cape there, just again to change its flow, so it looks a tiny bit different to that base model. I was just really keen to move us away as much as possible from that base miniature when it's a conversion. That's what I like to do anyway. The heads from the Blood Bowl kits, obviously they're American football type helmets, so they look like helmets, so I wanted to just fill in those bits so they looked a bit more like a smooth helmet. And then I realised that actually there was a better head on the sprue. Why was it better? Well, it had more feathers, which seemed fancier, more suitable for a noble. And the fit was much better. The way the neck fitted onto the already existing join meant there was zero work for me to do. It just dropped in there beautifully. And because he hasn't got the beard, the chin sort of sits in the crook. So I was like, oh, I better use this head then. But I really liked the pipe. So I decided to trim the pipe out from the other head. Now, with the Blood Bowl sprues, you get two versions of everything, or two copies rather of everything, which is great because in the end I had to do this head again. You won't see it on the video, but I absolutely screwed up the first one, so I had to do it all over again. But you can see there just what a lovely fit that is in. And I really should have pinned the head and painted it separately. There was no need for me to glue the head in. I don't know why I did it. My concentration levels. This project's been on and off for about 3 weeks, and I've been doing a lot of stuff to do with our Kickstarter during that time. And I think I needed possibly to give the project a little bit more focused concentration at times. But there we are, connecting the pipe in there, just using Tamiya extra thin. It's a strong enough join for a tiny piece like that. Now I was sort of looking at the horse. There wasn't much more I thought to do with the horse other than, changing the paint job and popping Stirland on there. And then I was just looking at the feathers that I had left over from not using Harold's head. I thought, well, they might look quite cool on the horse's headpiece. So yeah, thought, screw it, let's have a go. As soon as you start cutting up a resin model, I love it because the pressure's off, basically. The first cut's always the worst, and then after that, well, it's worthless now anyway, so have some fun. But I was amazed by the difference just popping those feathers in the headdress made to the overall miniature, as in taking it away from that original look. So here he is, ready for priming. I just used a normal Chaos Black primer for this. I don't use anything different when I'm painting with resin. I use the same primer I use for plastic models and for resin models. As I said, the only thing really I've done differently with this guy is I have washed the resin, just warm soapy water and then let it dry. There's various reasons for doing this. If you're interested, go and look at the manufacturer's advice and follow it. That's always my go-to. And they suggested giving it a wash, so I did. So the body, but majority of the model is that Harold Gemmenson thing. We got the hammer off hands, and I'll figure out something to do with the rest of him at some point. And then say the head and the pipe from the Blood Bowl team. And you may have noticed on this, I didn't notice until I was much further into the paint job, that I had not put the scroll work from the little purity seal type thing he's got on his hammer. That should be glued on here at this point as well. But I was really, really happy with this conversion. It took a little while to do. There's nothing particularly extreme on there or anything, but it did take a little while to do, and therefore I was quite keen, because I have a time limit on these videos, although you may have noticed this one is a week late. I have a time limit on this video, so I thought if I've spent more time on the conversion work, then really I'm going to have to simplify the paint work. Not cuts and corners, just simplify it. And I was like, it'll be fine. I had an idea in my head exactly what I was going to do with this guy. And it lasted for all about 5 minutes, as you're about to see. So let's start off with the mount, the horse. So I was really keen throughout the entire paint job to focus in on those provincial colours of green and yellow. And I thought one of the ways we could do that is look at bringing in the yellow in different ways other than just yellow paint. So I was like, right, what horse colours are there? What the phrase is, colourings you get on a horse that err more towards that yellow. And they had these ones called, I think, a yellow dun, I think it's called. I really, really like that. I love the fact that the legs faded down into black and the mane and the tail were black. And I thought that's going to paint up really nicely and, again, quite simply. but again, also give us that yellow straight away on the horse. Not obvious, not in your face, but again, all the time just suggesting green and yellow, green and yellow, green and yellow. So I went through my various paint collections and I decided I thought Mournfang and Golden Brown here by Pro Acryl were the right colours to go with. Now, I love using an airbrush where appropriate. So when identifying areas on the model, I thought the airbrush would do the most work. I was like, do you know what? There's not that much of the horse on show, but this will give me a really, really nice effect on the horse. I must say, I think the sculptors at Specialist Games absolutely smash horses when they get a chance. So really, really lovely to paint this bit. So I'm spraying here at about 20 to 25 psi. I'm using a 0.4mm needle and nozzle, and this is in one of our Harder and Steenbeck signature series Infinities. Now I've thinned the Mournfang at least 50-50. I'm using Vallejo airbrush thinner at the moment. I tend to use Vallejo airbrush thinner or Life Colour airbrush thinner, whichever my local gaming store, as Incon Gaming, has in stock. I just pick up a couple of bottles when I go in. So the highlight here, I'm using the Pro Acryl gold brown colour, and I'm just more or less spraying sort of top down, a zenith, or we might hear it referred to. So basically the light's falling from above. Where is it going to light? And one of the reasons I wanted to use the airbrush on this was I love how it can give you really quite soft highlights on these larger areas of sort of organic shapes like the legs and the muscles that you can see. Just thought it'd be the perfect tool for it. And I was so excited for this project at this point because I thought I have absolutely nailed this colour for the horse. I was really happy with the conversion. Nailed the horse colour, thinking, right, we're on here. This is going to be a special one. What a way to, kick off the year. We've had the Dark Angels, the Krieg, and now a bit of Warhammer Empire. Fantastic. The black, I just use model colour black. Use whatever black you like. Again, through the airbrush, normal thinner, same pressure. And I'm just spraying the ends of the feet, and then some, a little bit up the legs. Just to get that lovely fade, that lovely transition that we can get from the airbrush really simply. And then anywhere that I wouldn't have been able to be accurate enough with that, I'm just going to go in and paint in with my hairy brush, so same colour. For the armour itself, so I'd already changed my mind. Initially I was like, oh, do you know what, I'm just going to do all of the barding on the horse gold. It'll look great. And I don't know what made me change my mind, because this was quite a few weeks ago now, but something did. So I decided I was going to do it green instead. So again, dug through my big bag of green paints. These are the ones I came up with, mixed the darker one and the lighter one together, thinned it down on the wet palette with just a bit of water, and then I'm stippling it on for my base coat. And essentially what I wanted to get was that kind of almost enamelled effect on the armour, so you could almost see the sort of beaten marks of how the steel has been beaten out over the armour, and then as it's been painted over, you see all those sort of dents, and they're they catch the light in that certain way. So by stippling on that base coat and then essentially working my way up until I'm using that pure tail light green colour, I'm just doing lots and lots of little dashes and scratches for that. Again, keeping the highlighting really nice and simple. Essentially, if it's facing upwards towards the light, it'll be the brightest. If it's facing away from it, it'll be a bit darker. Nothing more complicated than that. So once I got up to just the pure green tail lights, I added in a little bit of moot green, and I'm just going for smaller areas of the highlights. Now this, I love painting in this style. I find it very relaxing, and as I say, there was so little pressure on this miniature in the one sense, because it was a bit of fun, bit sketchy. Get a Warhammer Fantasy miniature up on the channel. I really want to do more and more fantasy stuff. You guys seem to enjoy the Dwarf King I did. So I'd really love to be doing a fantasy video at least once a month. We'll just see if the appetite's there. So this was so far thoroughly enjoyable. And then I'm just adding more and more of the moot green. I'm not really doing any sort of edge highlighting. I didn't want to do that style on this miniature. I wanted to see how it would look if I did much more of that sort of grimy kind of paint job where we focus a little bit more on sort of texture and shadows rather than sort of super crisp edge highlights. And here we are working up finally to moot green. And again, I'm focusing this really on areas of I want to draw the eye to. So the head of the horse, the neck, that seemed like a really obvious focal point. So we're just going in and just doing a little bit there. And I'm keeping the paint nice and dilute. So it's on my wet palette. It's probably at least 50-50 paint and water. Touch off the excess on a piece of paper towel so you're not washing it all over the model. And then just sort of getting comfortable, relaxing, and and just going in and doing lots of little dashes and scratches. And painting in this way means every individual scratch isn't really going to make much of a difference. So if you do muck it up, it doesn't really matter. Just wanted to say huge thank you to those of you that support us over on Patreon. At the moment, Andy's just finished a big sort of 2-hour series on some bust painting, and I know he's moving on to some Eldar over the next few weeks. So if you'd like to get extra videos over there each week, usually more in depth and to a display level sort of paint job, then think about checking that out. We also do exclusive podcast stuff and get early access to tickets and merchandise and all sorts of other bits and bobs. But the support you guys give us over there allows myself and Andy to do this. So we hugely appreciate it. And if for any reason you can't support us over on Patreon, then liking this video, subscribing to the channel, telling your mates about it, popping a comment down there. It does make a massive difference to channels like ours. So I really appreciate that as well. So I've decided to try and move away from the same paints I use all the time. I don't think it's good to get stuck in a rut. So I was like, right, let's try new. Where in the past I'd probably have used decayed metal. So there I thought, right, I'll mix up Castellax and Rhinox hide. Essentially a similar colour to decayed metal. Let's chuck that on and see how it works. And I looked at it and I was like, it's all right. It's not bad. I'd have preferred decayed metal, but it's good to try these things. And then I thought, well, I need to get some yellow in there as well. I thought the gold was going to give me the yellow, heraldically, in the past, gold and yellow, they've been synonymous. So I tried a little yellow trim. Wasn't quite the right colour. Sort of try out one of these new paints as well, these Atom paints. I'll give them a go. Haven't got on them that well, the ones I've used. I thought keep trying. Didn't really like the yellow enough, so added a little bit of a contrast yellow over the top just to pump it up a bit. Okay, so not really liking how it's looking at the moment. It's looking a bit play school, but we'll keep going. And then I thought, well, let's keep pushing the green thing. So I wanted the cloth elements on the model to also be green. And I realised I don't own sort of many of that sort of classic kind of grass green colour. So it's kind of working with what I got. And that's why some of these paints you see here, you're probably no longer going to be able to get. But the reason I was choosing these colours was to try and keep that kind of the more natural looking, forest greens, grass greens, those sorts of colours. So I base coated the cloth using black green because I know it covers really, really well. And then when it comes to highlighting, just a really nice, simple highlight. I look at it underneath the lights. I see where the folds are facing away from that light and therefore won't hit it. And we just follow the other part. So the parts where the light is hitting it, just a largest brush you're comfortable with using. Dilute the paint so it's not leaving any brush marks on the model. And we just do nice slow strokes, just filling in where those highlights would go. I wasn't quite happy with the green, so I thought I'll just pop a glaze. So a glaze, a very, very, very thin, dilute layer of paint, just ever so slightly tints what's underneath it. So I thought I'll use orc flesh for this. That'll give me the green I'm looking for. Essentially what I managed to end up doing was painting exactly the same green colour that I painted on the barding using entirely different paints. Which is a bit of a shame, but not the end of the world. I thought, at this point, I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. I thought, I'll just freehand some flames on. That'll be a laugh. Make him look a little bit more, what's the word? Important. He's flashing his cash around a little bit. Stirland is a poor province, but, it's super corrupt. All the nobles, they've got all the cash and all that. So, they can have some nice bit of designs on there. And then I thought, well, I've freehanded some flames on here, just using the Warboss green, so the lighter green, the highlight green on there. I thought, what, why don't I just freehand some checkers on here as well? So this idea of a nice simple paint job, because I'd taken a bit too much time with the conversion, had clearly gone right out the window by this point. And particularly when I was unable to have the required hand-eye coordination here to do the checkers. It took me about 3 goes to just get miscounting it. You can't really see it in the picture, but they're quite deep folds on this side of it. I absolutely nailed it on the other side of the model practicing, and then I thought, I'll film it on this one. Completely the wrong decision. Should have filmed it on the other side. But eventually we get there. And then a little lighter green there, Scarsnick green, just going over a few of the sort of most raised areas, just again to help differentiate it a little bit from there. So again, I like the idea, just maybe not the execution wasn't quite right on it, but I was still feeling pretty good. I was like, you know what, that freehand, that came off really easy, really comfortably. I don't do it very often, so that was nice to know I've still got sort of the brush control and whatnot for that. So next up it was, okay, where's the next colour coming in? I thought it's got to be a bit of red on here. It's Warhammer, it's nice to get a bit of primary colours and stuff. So I thought, well, there's some leather reins, there's some leather straps around the tail and all the rest of it. So let's go in here. And I decided to use Barracknard Burgundy because I thought, well, if I'm going to use red, I don't want it to be too punchy, too post-box red. Let's just, keep it a little bit more subdued, mixed in a bit of Evil Sons for the highlight on it. And actually, as a colour, I really like how it came out. I think I'll use that mix again in the future on something else. Not sure what, but on something. But at this point, I absolutely hated everything that I had done. It just was nothing like what I'd pictured I was going to paint the model. Like I said, I was going to do gold barding, bit of green here and there, job done kind of thing. So, yeah, not ideal. One thing I did know that was going to be fine was I was going to use a Vallejo Metal Colour Series Silver for the chainmail. These metallics are really, really fluid. They're fantastic for using on areas like this. So I've got very little on the brush. I have to touch the model very, very lightly for that paint to come off. So when you're trying to be delicate and when you're trying to wash it into areas like chainmail where you've got tons of those little divots, it's an absolutely brilliant paint for using that sort of thing with. So I decided I didn't like the yellow. So I black it all out. This is a bit of a theme, repainting things. And I thought, right, I'm just going to use, I know paint, I know Elven Gold, I'll use that. That's a really yellow gold. Let's bang that all over it. That'll do the job. So yeah, I went ahead and applied the Elven Gold, and you can see just how much of a yellow gold that is when we pop it on there. Yeah, nice. I like the armour design. I do like the armour design. Wanted to knock it back a bit. So again, go-to recipe 50/50 Garagax Rattling Grime. It's a lovely little acrylic mix. I think gives a very similar effect to like an oil wash, like a brown oil wash. I really like it. I don't like this at all. Hate this. Looks awful. Really disappointed because at this point I feel like I've put quite a lot of time into this model for it to be something that I do not care for. So I got on the blower to Andy and to Ben and had a bit of a rant to them, and they both very helpfully sort of were like, oh, well, maybe you should try this, maybe you should try that. And essentially both of them said there's the three primary colours on there, it's too much. It's not easy to look at the model with the eyes being drawn to different areas. So consider changing that. And then the gold, again, was too yellow. So do my normal sort of golds that I enjoy doing, those more desaturated golds, old golds, and work with that. See how that comes out. I thought, all right, I can do that. So grab Runal Brass, this lovely sort of pale gold colour, went in, highlighted up all of the gold areas with that. I mean, highlighted. I mean, I've stippled it over 90% of the area. So it's obviously it's the primary sort of colour that's on there, but it's a lovely paint, Runal Brass. And then I gave it a wash of Poxwalker. I can't remember. It might have been the Flesh Eater Quartz or something I did a year or so ago, but I remembered using Poxwalker on gold and really liking the sort of verdigris type thing it gives you. I know it's not necessarily realistic and all the rest of it, but it looks cool. So that's all we worry about. So yeah, gave it a little wash of that, and that helped. And again, in my mind, I was like, oh, green, that's good. We're using green. That's a good idea. Now, what was I going to replace that red with? Okay, so Ben was like, why don't you do like a yellow leather on this? Okay, great. So I've used Rhinox, English Uniform, and Heavy Gold Brown here. You probably can't get the two Vallejo paints now. I don't know what the new range has, but you can see the colours that I'm using. So hopefully you can use what's in your collection or go and get a similar one. So again, paint up exactly the same way. Very, very simple, working up darkest through to mid-tone. And then once I was using the English Uniform and the Heavy Gold Brown, I was sort of doing lots of little dashes and scratches on the leather parts just to add a little bit of texture and interest to the model. It's just a way I enjoy painting. And I find it quite relaxing because, again, lots of little accidents. They don't really matter, these scratches. They look cool. I think they look, they give life to the miniature, life to the paint job. And actually the difference that heavy gold brown or gold yellow made was huge. Really, really cool. Really, really liked it. Now we were going to move on to the scroll work on the barding. So here I use, this is a mix I commonly use when I'm doing like purity seals or things like that. So I start with a base of US olive drab. It's sort of a green-brown colour. Loads of different companies will do their own version of a drab. They might call it, I don't know, khaki drab, olive drab. It's all the same sort of thing. It's sort of a slightly green, grey, brown colour. And then I highlight it up using, just by mixing in more and more of the Karak stone. until the Carrack stone is my final highlight, just on the edges. And I was sort of happy again now. I really liked how this was coming out, but I was a little bit trepidatious because I was like, what on earth was I thinking? Shaving the detail off and then freehanding a load of text on there when the last time I freehanded text was probably 5 years ago. But anyway, past me is an idiot. But at this point, we were committed. We were in. So I drew on with pencil just to check that the letters would fit. And then I was going to do like loads of reference pictures, copy them, all the rest of it. But I'll be brutally honest with you, I was so fed up at this point, I just went, sod it, watered down some black paint and just went in and tried it. And this is exactly what I'm filming here. I didn't do any cleanup, any tidy up, anything else. I just went in, had a go, and actually it came out absolutely fine. So yeah, quite happy with that. Tips here, I don't really know. A good point on your brush, a steady hand. I'm not the person to come to for freehand advice. As I say, I do it probably 2 or 3 times a year. I just don't get the opportunity to do it more often than that. So once the letters were sort of initially placed in, so I knew that they fitted, then I went in and just sort of started changing the shapes of them slightly so they looked like a weird oldie-timey script. Again, wasn't copying anything here. I really should have done. I should have looked at a reference photo. I've always said that to people, but I didn't. So I just sort of made them fatter in certain areas, put little extra dashes here and there, just made them look, like I say, a bit old-timey. And you know what? It was really cool. I was really happy. Yeah, does the job. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Wouldn't have changed this at all. So there he is. Now we know where he's from. The eyes on the horse were really interesting. They are sculpted in such a way that the iris has a recess, which is really interesting for painting because it sort of tells you exactly where you need to be doing the pupil, rather, as a pupil has a recess, sorry. And yeah, no, it is the iris, isn't it? Has a recess around it. So I thought, right, have a look at some photos of horses' eyes, get an idea. Sorry, this bit's a little bit out of focus, but hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. So I paint it in black, and then I essentially use grayscale. So I use grey, and then I use a very, very light grey to go from black through grey to white, effectively. So we get a little bit of transition. The eye is quite big, right, on this model, so we need to do a little bit of work with it. So just looking at the photo, thinking about how it would catch the light, pop in here and put the pupil in. And let's say the pupil seems to be this weird, like, sort of oblong. I'd never have thought of that if I was trying to paint it from memory. I'd have never thought to do that. And then I really loved that colour in the photo, so I just grabbed some Gore-Grunter fur contrast, thinned it down with a little water on my palette, took off the vast majority of it, so there's barely any on the brush, and then just touch it over that pre-shade that we've done. And because your contrast paint is so see-through, the grayscale that we've done underneath it, the black, grey and white we've done underneath it, comes through, and it gives us our shade and our highlight. And then it was just a case of going in and putting a little highlight dot up in the corner. But again, really, really fun thing to do. This is the first horse I think I've ever painted. And actually, I couldn't be happier with how the horse part of it came out. So that's a big plus. Now, feathers. Again, past Henry, thought it'd be great to put as many feathers as possible on this model. What I was thinking. And originally I was going to do sort of colourful ones or white ones with a colourful stripe or something like that. But again, I sort of had a chat with Ben and we thought maybe, the Stirland, there's loads of hunting, there's loads of woods in Stirland, the fact that they're not as fancy as some of the other provinces, maybe just doing like eagle feathers would look nicer. And I thought it would. And so I painted them up like that and then realised I got the colour completely wrong. So painted over all of that. I base coated it using olive drab, so the same colour we had on the scroll. Now I'm going in and putting the black stripes in just with black paint. I will highlight that with a touch of grey once they're all on there. I'm kind of sorry, there's certain bits of this tutorial that I was in such a foul mood because nothing was going right that I didn't film. I was just trying to paint. So I apologise if it's not as perhaps comprehensive a tutorial as it could be. I hope there's still some bits and bobs in here that are useful to you when you're doing some work. Then I mix in Baneblade Brown to that olive drab, and then eventually I mix Ivory into that, and I just paint them sort of more white towards the tips. And this was just a case of having some reference photos on my phone to sort of glance at and go for. I'm really happy with how the feathers came out. Now, the lion pelt, or the pelt, it's a panther pelt, isn't it? So I wanted this to be quite plain because I didn't want to draw too much attention from other areas on the model. I thought it could dominate it if I wasn't careful. But also I wanted it to use it as a way to get more yellow into the scheme. And I thought, well, like that classic sort of lion, mountain lion colouring, that should work great for giving us kind of a subdued yellow. And again, I felt like the airbrush was a really useful tool to help me achieve this fairly swiftly. And as it was, this was a lovely thing. It took about 15 minutes, I think, in total to get the pelt done, maybe 20 minutes. And I actually thought it was going to take ages. So it's always like that, isn't it? On a bigger paint job, things that you think will be quick aren't, and then things that you think will take ages sometimes end up being nice and simple and efficient. So I'm working up through a brown, Thondia brown, then up into this English uniform, which is kind of this yellowy colour. And then I will add in a further highlight of Hobgrot hide in a minute. I'll mix into this. Again, just trying to get that yellowy lion colour. Always spraying 20 to 25 psi, and I think I was thinning all these paints the same amount as well, which is approximately 50-50, maybe a touch more thinner than paint. You're going to need to change that depending on your own setup and the conditions that you spray in, but that's where I go. Start 50-50, start about 25 psi and adjust from there. So once I had that nice simple highlight in there, again just kind of spraying from above, see whether the folds would pick up the highlights. I then go back in and I start off with the English uniform Hobgrot hide mix, and I start to highlight it using my brush. And here I'm just going to do a ton of little dashes. Again, this is an army paint job. Yes, he's the character model, but I'm not painting him any differently than I would a trooper. There's just more details on him. So if you'd like to go and look at some fantastic fur tutorials, Andy's got a couple of beautiful ones up on horses he's done in the past, and some larger scale miniatures as well. But essentially all I'm doing here is just putting dashes in there, making sure they all go in the same direction, working up lighter and lighter colours, not doing the entire model, spending a tiny bit more time and effort on the head because you're going to look at that a little bit more. As I say, it was just a case of getting the mix on the palette. Again, I'm just thinning using water, getting the mix on the palette so that the paint is coming off the brush without me having to press down very hard, and making sure there's not so much on the brush that when I do that, it floods off on the model. And then for the inside of the pelt, as it were, the sort of leathery bit, I just used Bane Blade Brown to do the scratches with here because I just wanted it to make sure it was different to the fur, as it were. And the Bane Blade obviously is that little bit, that a lot less yellow, isn't it, than the English uniform and the Hobgrot hide. Now, the armour was going to be a nice and simple thing. Originally, I thought he was going to be all in gold, much like the barding on his horse. But as we know, the plans have changed significantly by this point, much like apparently the scope has changed for the old world. So very excited about that. But I felt like, he needs to be in silver armour. But again, after chatting with Ben, we felt it should be that kind of grimy, darker silver, not super polished. So just mixed a little bit of Rattling Grime into Iron Warriors. Iron Warrior is one of my absolute favourite silvers to use. It's this lovely sort of darker, almost slightly brown silver. I think it looks fantastic. And just sort of stippled and scratched that on as the base coat. And then I've used Lead Belcher here as the highlight. Again, I'm not going crazy with the highlighting, but you can see I've made a little bit more effort, for instance, on the helmet, just to shape the highlight. So as if the light's coming from above, the helmet has a sphere shape at the top. So we sort of put a little spherical shaped highlight of that Lead Belcher at the top. And then Necro Gold, the gold I wish I could have used on everything and probably should have done, but foolishly thought it was a good idea to start experimenting, trying out new things. Just using this straight on a few little bits of his armour, just a few little bits of the trim, again, to help bring the yellow into the model in another way. I really, really like how it's come out on the hammer, actually. I'm sure other jealous petty generals might think it looks a bit like Gal Maraz, but that's on them. This is clearly some family heirloom from the Stirlanders, who, of course, rightful claim to the throne of the empire, really. But as usual, that lot over in Altdorf. Anyway, so I've gone in there and mixed in a little bit of Garagax Sewer into the Necro Gold and just painted in a few of the shadows that I wanted to make sure they were darker, that wouldn't necessarily be caught by a wash because they weren't necessarily in a recess. I've absolutely mucked up the head. Like I said earlier, I should have kept it separate. I could not get in to paint it. These are the colours I used. It was a nightmare. Everything getting in the way. I couldn't get my brush in there to do it. Oh boy, but we're nearly there, right? So those are the colours I used. It came out all right. We've done way better skin tutorials and tons of videos. Go and have a look back through the various playlists. And I was going to experiment with a few different oil colours as well for this, but by this point I was like, I just need him finished. So I've gone for sepia. This is a dark brown oil. I have thinned that almost exactly 50-50 with mineral spirits. Once that is really mixed up into a proper sort of amalgamated mixture, I am going to apply it heavily onto the armour of the rider and the gold parts of him. But then I'm going to be a lot more deliberate with where I place it on the rest of the model. So you can see here I've switched to a brush that gives me a lot more precision. And I'm just sort of pin washing it into the rest of the barding and stuff, but I'm giving it sort of heavier washes when it's sort of big chunks of silver or gold. I've left a fair bit of this footage in, I think, actually, to do it. As long as our acrylic paintwork is all dry, so that's the paint we've done up until now, we won't have any issues with the mineral spirits or the oil paints reacting with them. So you're not going to have any problems at all with that. I am using old natural hair brushes here. If eventually the mineral spirits will destroy them, they won't be usable anymore. So you may just want to use synthetic brushes from the get-go. Obviously, I go through quite a lot of brushes, so when it's no good anymore for me to do normal painting with, it tends to go into the metallics pot. And when it's no good anymore for the metallics, it tends to go into the oil pot. And then when it's completely given up, that's it, in the bin. So I left the oil to dry overnight. Don't need to leave it overnight, but I always think it's a natural end to a hobby session. This Abteilung stuff at that consistency, that dilution, will dry in about an hour, maybe less. When I'm using a thin mix like that, I try not to hair dryer it because it would tend to move it around a little bit too much. And particularly on the silver and the gold, I wanted that oil to sort of stain the whole surface, so I didn't want to blow it into any of the recesses. But because we were quite careful where we applied it, there was basically no cleanup to do. And now it was just a case of going in and doing a few little finishing touches to him. So obviously the oil has dulled down certain areas, and it's a nice opportunity to bring back a little bit of focus, perhaps a quick re-highlight here and there. So when I look at him as a whole piece here, I'm like, okay, where do I want to draw the eye? So his head of the horse, the hammer, I think are great. They're all great little tiny portions of this model. And then to try and turn it into that nice kind of triangle, I figure, well, I'll highlight his leg as well. So that's the triangle that we're just going to go back in and re-highlight a few of those areas, just hopefully to make it a little easier to look at. And actually, that was one of the issues I found with this model was sort of where my eye was going and trying to keep it sort of harmonious, even though it's a very sort of simple paint job. So just going back in with the Necro Gold on the gold, and the oil paint is dry here, so I can paint over the top of it with acrylics, no problem. I go back in with lead belcher for the silver areas, and I went back in with the little moot green, tail light green mix for any bits of the green that I wanted to do. This took 5 minutes to do, but I think it does make a huge difference, actually. And by this point, I'd completely run out of time. I was already a week late with the video, so I just grabbed my box of tufts and just stuck a load of them on the base. And here he is, my take on an Empire general from Stirland. If you're still here and you're still watching this video, thank you. The only reason this got done was because of you guys. I don't mind sharing my projects with you here on YouTube. They don't always have to be tutorials, right? Sometimes it's fun to just share. And if this had just been a personal thing, I wouldn't have finished him. He'd have got binned off and I'd have gone and worked on some other project. So honestly, I really, really wanted there to be some like poignant things and some really interesting, useful teaching points and all the rest of it from this video. But if I'm brutally honest with you, I don't know what went wrong. I don't know why it went wrong. I don't know why it was such an issue for me to get this model looking how I wanted it to look. So I think the best thing I can do really is just draw a line under it and just move on. What I've got is a finished model, right? Finished, not perfect. I am by no means sad. There was tons of positives to come out of this little project. I had moments of real hobby joy that really reminded me of why I loved doing this hobby, and potentially stuff that I've forgotten a little bit over the last few years, focusing so much on getting the channel up and running, getting the business going. And I've not felt some of that stuff in years, particularly getting to do all the research bits for it as well, but also just that my mind wandering as I was painting, thinking, daydreaming about these settings and thinking about armies and, I could do a whole Stirland army, I could do this, that and the other. So there was tons and tons of these really wonderful moments during this project, even if the end result wasn't exactly what I wanted. So those are what I'm going to remember or choose to remember from it. But I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope I have achieved some of the things I set out to achieve, namely to use two quite, well, let's be honest, really one with a weapon swap, but a pretty... I'd say iconic kit, simply because it's based off such an incredible piece of artwork by John Blanche, and I think the miniature does a really, really good job of paying tribute to that. So straight away, you're playing around with a potentially iconic thing. I'm really happy that I feel he looks different enough to that base miniature that when you glance at him, you think, oh, that's a cool Empire General. You don't think, oh, there's a conversion of the Knights Panther. So yeah, really, really happy with that side of it, and I hope you've, I hope you've found some fun and maybe a few little tips and tricks within this video. And so, I think it's the first horse I've ever painted. I think so. It's always nice to tick those sort of things off in your hobby. And when I popped him next to the Dwarf King, I did a while back. Actually, he's not a million miles away from him. One of the biggest, most frustrating parts of this was the amount of time I spent on this model for what is, in my opinion, a paint job that I would typically spend a day or two on, if that. But it's took me ages because of having to repaint it so many times and all the rest of it. So, typically if I spent this long on a model, I'd expect it to look like a proper display level, miniature. But actually, he's not far off the king, and I spent a little bit more time on the king. So it's all right. If I do choose to do an army in the future of Stirland once I finish the dwarves, he will go in it. Might sort his basing out. That really was rushed, but yeah, I think he'll probably go in it. So as ever, if you've got any questions about anything I've done in the video, please pop them down in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks ever so much for all of your support. Take care, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com and maybe Ben can sort you out.